And welcome to another Mapping Kalegen with me, Andy Law. I hope you can all hear me. If someone could drop into the comments and give a quick, "You're not crackling, Andy. Your mic is working this week," that would be amazing. If anyone was here last week, you'll know that we had to restart the entire stream because sadly it was a crackle fest. Hopefully that's all fixed. Anyway, today, we are going to be dealing with more Mapping Kalegen. I'm going to quickly bring that up on screen as I haven't done my share screen yet. So let me just share that now and bring it up like so. There it is. Good old Kalegen as it currently stands. Mike's working well. Thank you very much. Delighted to hear that. Right. So if you've never been with us before, quite simply, I'm going to be mapping Kalegen, which is one of the cities in the Reikland for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I'm going to be taking ideas from you as we go along. And if you have any, feel free to drop them in the comments. Any comment that you drop in, I can bring up like so. For example, hey, nice to see you go, Baum. And Nico there for Grafhol's Crook and for the next Emperor. Indeed, and Hawk is telling me, aye, Captain. And sounds good so far. Delighted to hear that. We've had, as I mentioned before, quite a few mic issues in general, but I think they're now all fixed, at least on this computer. The one through by, that's in the other room. Through by, that's a good Scottish phrase. Do you use through by out there? Anyway, the one through by, I was twiddling with the settings during my lunch break today in between tapping away at words. And I'm hoping that tomorrow the sound will be super crisp, but we're going to do another sound test before we go live tomorrow. Anyway, today we are going to be finishing off up the north the palace. Now, we finished off a good chunk of the palace last week, but I did an awful lot of chatting and not an awful lot of mapping because it had been quite some time since I'd last done some mapping. It'd been, well, a good few months since before we started doing the Lorehammer streams. So today we're going to finish off the palace, perhaps do that little run that's sitting down this side here. Let me just grab a brush so you can see which particular part I mean. Give myself a nice big brush there. I'm going to say this section here, I think we could probably fill that in as well. Make sure that we fill in that bit of ground, that bit, decide what's sitting directly behind the palace up to the walls. We're also going to have on the outside an extra set of gardens, but we're not going to draw that just now because we're only going to be drawing the parts that are inside the castle itself. Right, so before we get going, I have a couple of things to say. Number one, at the moment over on YouTube, inside the community tab, is it community tab, comments tab, chat tab, whatever one it is. I'll bring it up actually so that I actually know what the heck I'm talking about. So let me just. Okay, so yeah, that one over there. We've got a poll up at the moment for what me and Lord Master Sotek will be discussing this Sunday at 4 o'clock. And we've got 3 different options currently up there. One is Cults of Tzeentch, one is Cathaean Dragons, and the other one is the good old Hag Witches of Kislev. And we've chosen those 3 because it ties in quite closely to the recently announced DLC for Warhammer Total War Warhammer, get that the right way around. 3. So that's going to be a super fun one. If you haven't voted for that yet, do go over to YouTube into our community little tab there. Go find that and vote. At the moment, the Hags have got the lead, but they're not that far ahead of Cathaean Dragons if you are a Cathaean Dragon fan. So that's number 1. Number 2, this weekend, and this is entirely related to what I'm doing here, so I'm going to mention this at the end of the stream as well, just so you all know. This weekend, I'm doing a special masterclass on Rookery over on Rookery Publications Patreon. And it directly relates to this because it's all about writing up locations for a city just like this. But it's not just about writing up locations so that we can, you know, tap away, write loads of cool stuff, get it all in. It's about doing it concisely, doing it in an interesting fashion, and doing it in a way that makes it immediately accessible to other GMs should they want to use your material, and also leaves enough space for them to then plug in their own ideas. I'm also going to be discussing how you can wend the web of different connections in the city together through the use of different parts of the write-up. So I'm going to be doing that this Saturday at 7 p.m. If you want to be a part of that masterclass, pop over to Rookery Publications Patreon. It very possibly may even be, it probably isn't inside, it isn't. So I'm going to go grab a link for that while I'm at it, because this is going to be a fun one. I'm really looking forward to this one, actually. So let me grab a link for that while we're chatting. Right, other than that, I'm going to be going through mapping today. Our plan is, let me just make sure that I actually get the right link here and don't accidentally send you somewhere else. Let's bring in a quick link-a-rooney. And I'll also bring it up on screen should you be happening to watch this later. There it is, link-a-rooney. Do pop over there. It's for our Brazen Rook patrons that the masterclass goes out for. So that's the £5 a month. Even if you only want to watch just this single one, just drop us a fiver, and then you can go watch all our previous masterclasses as well, which are all available up there. If you can't find them, just ping me and I'll go find them all out. Anyway, let's get to the nitty-gritty of what we're doing today, which is finishing off these parts of the map. Now, if you have any ideas for these sections, I'm going to quickly go over what we've got left in this part of the map, and you can quickly run around inside your head and see if there's anything that you think should go in there. But beyond that, I'm just going to dive in and start working on them. Now, I've got a pretty bad cold, which you might not be able to hear. You might, depending on how much the medication's actually doing its job. It's one of the reasons this one's going to be a slightly shorter one this week, because I don't want to exhaust myself from doing the writing bits that I'm doing just now and from the roleplay tomorrow, because I'm really looking forward to that. In fact, I will just quickly mention that because I just popped up an image for that. If you're over on our Discord, do go take a quick check out in the Lawhammer chat parks. I've just popped up an image for the Devil's Bowl, which was a good bit of fun. I'm not sure if that's been depicted since first edition. I should go check that, shouldn't I? Anyway, the Devil's Bowl, which we're not calling the Devil's Bowl. In our one, it's called the Damon's Bowl, is a rather funky place that we're going to be visiting tomorrow when we do our Lawhammer game. So anyway, let's get diving into here. Before I dive in, like always, I am going to jump into the comments, see if there's anything worthwhile there, and then jump in. So let's run in and go. Evening from Alan. Great to see you there, Alan. Delighted you made it. And Turth goes hello, Andy. And hello in turn. Go Bam goes, you are noticed. Definitely are. Yaka goes hello. Hello. And indeed, you've been noticed also. Oxecutor goes, I think an area of garden at the rear of the palace would be a kitchen garden. I don't think that's a bad idea. It's very tight here, though. And if you think of where it's going to be sitting inside the sun, and where the sunlight is, this is going to be almost entirely in shadow, that small section that's sitting at the back here. Now, admittedly, our shadows may suggest the opposite. We've discussed this in previous streams as to where the shadows are currently positioned. But this section here at the back is going to be almost entirely in shadow. That might be better almost as just flat road with very little on it. But I'm open to other ideas. If we're going to be putting some form of garden in for that, we'd be looking for it to probably be at the front here. We already have a greenhouse marked to be in the front over there. So that might be a better option for it. Yaka then says, I wonder if the first stream was lost on YouTube. Is that the one that died? It wasn't so much lost as I just got rid of it. Alan then goes, I have only just seen how long the shadow extends. That is a huge tower. It bloody is. That was a tower that was built for a celestial wizard. It is proper huge. Hawk comes in and goes, it's community. Thank you very much. I couldn't remember for the life of me. I'm such a YouTube noob. So it's the community tab over on YouTube. So if you're there at the moment, you should be able to find the community tab. And if you want to vote for what Lore Master and Sotek will be discussing, well, Lore Master Sotek and I will be discussing this Sunday, you can go to so there. I'll be closing that vote off at the end of this stream. So be aware, if you want to vote, you'll need to do so before the end of the stream. Go back and pop some says, I'm new to the series. And what is the lore behind this city? Right, that's a really big question. I'm not going to go into it in any great depth, but I'll give you just a little bit, a summary, shall we say. This city is a recently built city within the last 50 to 70 years, and is a center of diplomacy for the Reikland. It's ruled by House Halskrug, the leader of House Halskrug, the Duke of Halskrug. Leitman is his name. Leitman Halskrug. Leitman I can't remember, 3rd, 4th, 28th, who can recall? Anyway, Leitman is the High Ambassador for the Reikland. So he is dealing with people from across the old world and beyond, and their relations that they have with Reikland. Obviously, a great deal of his work will take place in Altdorf, but not all of it. Indeed, many of his more secretive aside things happen here. And the entirety of Kalegen has been built to try and impress visiting delegates, diplomats, and similar. So, cut a long story short, it's a place of almost two faces. One face is what they try to present to those visiting important people, the VIPs, and the other face is the truth. We have built an enormous number of locations into this already. I think we're way over 100. And that's one of the reasons why I'm actually doing the inside the Rookery Masterclass on how to write locations, because it's going to take us quite a while to write all of these, and we are going to do so. But we need to do it in a concise, engaging, and interesting way. So one of the reasons I'm doing the masterclass is to teach anyone who wants to know how to do that sort of thing, how to do it. So that's loosely it. Beyond that, I will also go quickly over to the map. If I pull up my section of the master map down here, so you can get an idea of where it actually is in Reikland. So for those of you who don't know your empire, this is just going to be a lot of detail splashed on the screen. But for those of you who do, you'll hopefully be able to recognize what we have here. We have the capital of the empire sitting over, oh, let me grab my brush, sitting here to put a big scribble on the screen. That's Altdorf. Kalegen is all the way over here. Two primary routes to Kalegen are up the River Bergen from Karaberg, which is the capital of Middenland when this map is set, which is 2512 IC for those of you who want dates. So if you want to go from Altdorf, you could go down the River Reich and then up, or alternatively, you could go down this canal here and then up there. I suppose that's enough to get us going with at least where we are. It is our riverside city. And we're currently working on the palace section to the north. In the last stream, we just finished off this section over here. Okay, so that'll do for that. Schema pops in and goes, good evening, everyone, and good evening to you too, Hokodley. Heyo! Is current base of power for the former Reikland Imperial family before madness. In fact, that's a good one to mention. So this was once a family of emperors. Now, it's quite likely that when Warhammer The Old World starts detailing out all of the primary families for their game, that they'll overwrite the Halskrugs. But that doesn't mean that the Halskrugs weren't also an Imperial family before that. We'll just need a little bit of finagling to make it all work. I'm quite looking forward to what the Old World offers, actually. Yaka then goes, I have an idea about the big Soten sun clock. Oh, big sun clock. Do like that. So let's get to there. General Caster says, the mic sounds way better today. Delighted. Oh, thank you very much. It's the super sounds of the 60s. I'm going for the 60s, not the 70s. I'm a fan of K-Dragons, aren't we all? That was me giving you a link. SD pops in. The city's very new. It is, and two ambitious building projects. Yeah, it's a very ambitious burning project, some of which has begun to collapse already. And the garden does look quite nice, doesn't it, General Caster? I'm quite pleased with how it's all turned out in the end. Hugh pops in. Hey, Hugh, delighted to see you here. And Alan comes in too. Couldn't they just buy in whatever ingredients they need for the kitchen? Yes, they could, although a greenhouse with exotic fruits would fit the extravagance. I actually think I might prefer that. I quite like the idea that this city is not perfect. And by that, I mean it has been thrown up quickly. And in a perfect, practical world, this palace would already have several significant greenhouses put aside for various gardens so that they can feed all the staff and everybody else. But they haven't. They've just thrown it up. They've added extra bits and extra bits and extra bits. And they have been less concerned about what's practical and more concerned about what looks awesome, what's super useful, what really immediately impresses the folks that arrive. And I think that an exotic fruit section inside a greenhouse is much more fitting with what the Halskrugs are looking for from this place than alternatively a nice little appropriate and useful garden at the back. So yeah, I think that works really quite well. Pascal goes, good night, everyone. Indeed, good night to you. You as well. Lindsay, oh, hi, Lindsay. Lindsay's currently upstairs in a sniffle box. Should I be worried about all the purple everywhere? No. No. Actually, that's worth briefly discussing for those of you who've not been to one of the streams before. All of the locations inside this city have got two colors. Three in truth, because there's some yellow, but two colors. And that's not because all of the roofing that you'll find in Kalegen comes in one of two colors. It's to make sure that the map is super simple for us who are using it to immediately understand. Color number one is brown, and you'll see quite a lot of it sitting there on the screen just now. The brown color is used for pretty much all the buildings in the city. The purple color is the important one. That's for a location that we're going to do a special write-up for, much as I discussed earlier for the masterclass that I'm going to be doing for Inside the Rookery. And these write-ups are going to be popping over onto World Anvil. And you may note there's already in the palace a whole chunk of special places. But if we pull out and look at the part of the city that's already been done, every single last one of these we've discussed in a previous stream, and we've nailed down what it is. Whether it's over here, where we've got a temple to Grandfather Reich, where we've got a big, massive collapsed great ship that never really got out of the harbor. We've got a temple of Sigmar over here. We've got an old converted building where now Shallians are living. We've got a temple of Verena, which was never finished. So this is a half-built classical building sitting in the middle. We've got an engineer's workshop here. We've got a carousel with large swans on it, because the swans are the heraldry of the Hallskrugs. So yeah, we've got loads of buildings, all of which have been discussed in a previous stream. And if you're interested in any of those, I do really recommend those previous streams. They're really good. We discuss some really obscure lore as we work our way through what would make for the best city that we're building here for the Kalegen. And some of that conversations and some of the decisions that were made are just super awesome. Do recommend having a look back. If you want to know about all the locations we've put up in place already, we've got a huge chunk of them already popped out into our Discord channel. That's the Lawhammer Discord. There should hopefully be a link for that in the descriptions if you're on YouTube. If you're not, just pop over to YouTube later. You'll find the links over there. Yeah, they're mostly written out. Martin's been doing that. Martin, by the way, is a god, just so you all know that. He was helped to begin with by Yalab, and they built a lot. They've done, a lot of work to bring this city together. Kalegen reminds me of Blazing Saddles. It looks authentic from the front, but when you realize it's just all a movie set. Yeah, not unfair. Not unfair. So what happened to the town later? I mean, there's nothing like that on any map, I think. So it's been on a few towns, Kalegen, and as is often the case with Games Workshop properties, they remember to do it on some things. They remember to add things on other maps. They forget it on other maps. Their maps are rarely consistent. One of my jobs when I was first picked up to do mapping about 20 years ago or so for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was to collate all of the locations that had ever been mentioned in any of the novels, books, computer games in particular, so that when I did a map, at least it would be consistent with all my other maps that I'd done. Now, that wouldn't necessarily mean it'd be consistent with every map the Games Workshop had done, because often they had been created individually according to the needs of the individual game or the individual supplement. But if I was employed to do a map, it definitely would marry with everything else. The little location map that I showed earlier, where I showed you where Kalegen was and where Altdorf was, that map there was from my master map. And the master map is what I use to make sure that everything works together. Rogan then pops in and says, I was going to ask earlier, what tablet do you use? I heard Wacom. Do you recommend it? I'm not actually using a tablet per se. Let's see if I can get my camera to go boing. I'm using a big screen right there. Yeah, I'm drawing straight to my screen. It's my Cintiq. It's from Wacom. It's my Cintiq, and it absolutely kicks ass. Do I recommend it if you're wanting to make your job out of it? Yes. Now, before I use my Cintiq, which is stupidly expensive, thousands of dollars, pounds, or euros, or wherever you happen to be in the world, I'm going to move my camera slightly there so that there we go. Yeah, so it's really good, but if you're not looking to spend that much money, I was using before that just a normal Wacom Pro, and it was also brilliant, but I like drawing on screens nowadays. I have learned me previous lessons. One alternative that does work really well is something like an iPad Pro and a pencil. That works really well. It's much cheaper than buying a Cintiq, for example, which will cost you thousands rather than just 1,000 or so, but it is pretty good. Do I recommend it? Yes. Using a mouse is rubbish. I've done some work professionally with a mouse, and I do not recommend it. For those of you who are interested in Warhammer books that might have been done with a mouse, I present you Moussalon, Barney the Damned. I did the maps in that with a mouse. That was tough. And the Bretonnian book before that, wow, that was going back, Knights of the Grail. They were both done with mice. It took forever. Do not recommend. The PC that chose diplomatic careers and the PC that chose criminal type careers in Warhammer Fantasy. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to there. I'm going to presume what was going on in a previous conversation. Dominion Sorcerer, hello, delighted to see you there. Massive greenhouse would be incredibly extravagant because of how expensive the glass panels would be for it. Yes, I agree. We already have one expensive glass panel place, which I'll just mention here. You may notice this big circular roofing section. That is above the ballroom, the main ballroom, and it's all made of glass, and the glass is a dome and segmented into 20 parts, and each one of the 20 parts has been decorated with one of the zodiac symbols of the Warhammer world, and there's 20 zodiac symbols in the Warhammer world. So that's quite a fun location too, but I do agree that maybe making our greenhouse a bit bigger would be cool. So I'm taking that on board. I'm still not sure. I'll leave you to have your conversation in the chat. Hi, Andy. Hi. It's been a while since we were able to make it to live stream. Delighted that you made it, Richard. Very happy indeed. Yay. Hey, Hugh. Likewise, it's great to be here. And likewise, it's great to have you. Lindsay pops in and says, Swan Carousel, I know it's going to be lovely. Almost makes you want to visit this place, doesn't it? General Caster says, I noticed there's a marking for a Temple Media below the palace. That's correct. Got a small idea for that unless you're focusing purely on the palace instead. Today, we're focusing on the palace. We will probably be going down there. Last week, I mentioned that I'll do a poll for what part we're going to do next. I was going to do it last week, but I decided to put a poll up instead for Lord Master Sotek and I's Lorebeard stream. So that's up at the moment. Once that one's done, I'll put up a poll for the part we'll map next. Myrmidia is an extremely important religion in Kalegen because the current Duke's mum, as I recall, is mum, isn't it? Wife, mum. Oh, man, it's been too long. I think it's wife, it's not mum, is Tillian, and very strongly associated with the cult of Myrmidia. When was the last time the history of the Kalegen was sieged? And, well, it's never been sieged. Kalegen is far too new. It's only been here for about the last 50 or so years. Before that, it was just a tiny fishing village. But there was something here that has been besieged multiple times. And that's a state army fortress, which is in the bottom corner down here. And it's particularly difficult to take because it's on a large igneous rock plug, which you actually have to go up and into to even get access towards. This used to be the center for the state army here. There used to be a tiny village over here, and they had a small garden of Moor, which was up here. And a new Garden of Moor is going to be built on the outside of the city when we get up there. Yaka then pops in and says, do we have any buildings else spec to impress the elves? Yes, we do have a couple kicking around for exactly that reason. I will get to that when we do, but we're going to be worrying about that when we move up to the upper class part of the city. Sounds like her. It does. Love is on the road. Hi, Love is on the road. Delighted to see you here. Just in time to tease towards the master map. Indeed. Dwarves desire gold. I desire the master map. I'm always tempted to bring it up one more time just so you can get an idea. Just so everyone knows, my master map, which I can't actually access just now. I need to buy a new PC before I can get into it because the file got too big for this PC. I'm currently in the process of buying it, but when I found out how many thousands of pounds I need to spend on it, I held back. And then Lindsay bought some Taylor Swift tickets, which was really nice. So I'm probably buying that in the next few weeks or so. It's such a huge chunk of money that it makes me feel sick, but it has to be done. But anyway, there's a chunk of the master map, and as I mentioned before, we've got Altdorf and Kalegen on this, but the entirety of the empire is mapped out to that level of detail. Some parts of it are super messy, though, because the current file got an upscaling because I couldn't fit everything in very well, so I needed to make the map slightly larger. If I was doing this cleverly, it would have been done with some sort of vector-based program, but it isn't. This is all pixel-based, which means that I upscaled it, and a whole bunch of the map, I'd say about 2/3 of it, needs everything shifted around because of the upscaling. Won't take long. We're probably taking like 2 or 3 weeks, but it's not something that I'm going to be spending immediate time on for, I think, a variety of obvious reasons. In fact, you can actually see a bit of an old chunk of the road there. Funny. Anyway, let's get rid of that and finish off our comments and get into mapping. So where exactly is Kalegen located in the Reikland? You just saw that. It's south of Karrenberg. It's not closest to Marienburg, really, because it's up the River Bergen from Karrenberg. So the River Bergen lies on the intersection of, well, not on the intersection, it's over from the intersection of the River Reich and the River Bergen. And if you go up the River Bergen, around about 40 miles or so, you will find yourself Kalegen. Games Workshop maps different. Of course, they're done by different cartographers with different information, different times. Yep, I completely blame the cartographers. Folks like me. Big glass domes, never a big idea. They never fail. Just look at Titanics. Completely agree. Indeed, I think I recall when we first put that in that the dome was there pretty much for just PCs to break into and smash. The two. Yes, I understand what you're saying now. Thanks for clarifying that, Yaka. The bloke person says, could there be an exotic flowering greenhouse instead of a vegetable one, kind of like the Eden Project down in Cornwall? So we're talking more of a botanic garden, perhaps, rather than just simply, well, we could combine that whole thing together and have ourselves a bunch of botanic gardens down there, which I think works really rather well. So let's make sure we've got enough space to put those greenhouses in. But I'm also looking for some other things to go down there. We need to have some lawns that are big enough to deal with some sort of Warhammer equivalent of croquet. We need to have somewhere for the folks to promenade around and look frightfully important. Yeah, so we need that. Plus, there's some bits at the back of the there we go, back of the palace that I'd really like to figure out what's in those two blocks there, the block there and that thin strip. And Hugh says, I want to see Lowbird live streams on the Northman tribes. That would be quite fun. Hugh adds, Dominion Sorcerer adds 100%. The southern, more civilized tribes are never talked about enough. Yeah, I actually agree. When I did the Tome of Salvation, when I was writing that, one of my goals was to try and discuss some of the other tribes that were quite often forgotten about, but may have been dropped in here or dropped in there. Even some of the big ones, like, for example, I made sure that the Norse were explicitly discussed. The Fenones, the Teutons, they were mentioned as well. The Frykings get a small mention, as do the Ungauls. In fact, quite a number of them do. And all of them have got their own discrete, unique characters, and it's often easy to forget about them, particularly given that the 12 tribes that were bound together to create the empire get so much focus, and the Bretonnian tribes just over the mountains also get a ton of focus. But beyond that, they often get forgotten. They just become, if it's any of the northern tribes, just this amalgam of, yeah, they're Chaos Marauders, ain't they? They don't really have any character. And it'd be nice to actually drill into that a little bit. Alan says growing pineapples was a thing. It was. Creating heat to do that was also a thing. We also have bright wizards in the area, so potentially a thing that they can do in multiple different ways. It's an extravagance, perhaps less so if you've got bright wizards. We have a group of bright... Oh, I feel stupid. You're going on to it already. So maybe they have an arrangement. Yeah, I think that might be a good idea. Dominion Sorcerer then adds, also Princedom or Waldorf. Respect for using Princedom instead of Principality, Andy. Indeed, often using Princedom. Princedom was dropped in a variety of different places in Games Workshop books, and when I did the map for Reikland, I used Princedom for that one, although Principality was often used as well. The primary reason behind that is pretty mundane, and that's that the idea was to try and draw loose and clear distinctions from the most common terms used in the real world, because it's the Warhammer world and it is so very, very different to the real world, no matter how many parallels you can draw between the two. And that's one of the reasons why we always, when we're discussing religion, for example, try to drill down on ensuring that we're discussing priests, because in the Western world where all this stuff is created, the term priest is not actually used very commonly, although it is used very commonly in other parts of the world, or at least a translation of it into another language. Love is on the road. Precious. You bought tickets instead. Not sure what you're talking about there, so I'll just move along to my next Lowhammer quote, which is from Snadder. Just want to say the talking to Nagash was absolute delight. You are awesome. Thank you very much, Snadder. Really enjoyed the chat about Nagash. If you haven't seen that one already, do pop over to Lore Master of Sotek's stream. His YouTube channel, you should be able to find it up there right now. We did that last Sunday. I upscaled it. Yeah, that was a thing, upscaling. For those of you who don't use Photoshop, just trust me, it was awful. I'm mapping on a gaming laptop, near a drawing tablet, very much feeling the mouse takes ages coming. It's rubbish drawing with a mouse. If you're thinking of doing maps, I did a tutorial. In fact, it's worth discussing this map. I did a tutorial to explain how to do this map. This map was only started to show you how simple it was to use the techniques that I gave in the tutorial over in Rookery Publications. And this is not using any technique or brush that I didn't discuss in that tutorial. So if you want to know how to map like this, Rookery Publications Patreon, drop in there for a £5 Breeze and Rook backing, and you'll get access to that stream. If you can't find it, ask me and I'll get you access. In fact, I am going to drop this into the links for future references when we do Mapping Kalegen, because it's just too awesome not to mention. Could always make the glass dome a part of some sinister ritual. I mean, everything's got to do with some sinister rituals eventually with Warhammer, eh? Could the top left section be a stable for showing off horses, or maybe hunting dog kennel area? Now, we already have a significant stables in some of the wings over here. So all the way up the back would make it actually quite difficult to get access to. Although we could put a gatehouse at that small section. Let me just bring my onto the lines. Where's my lines? Oh, I'm all the way up there. There we go. We could right here prop a gatehouse, and we could have an easy way for going on the hunt there. So a smaller stables, a larger kennels, that'd be pretty cool, actually. Also, if we want to start discussing politics, perhaps it's worth saying that maybe the Hallskrugs have got a relatively good thing going on with one of the more dodgy houses in the Empire, the Trots. For those of you who've been watching my playthrough of The Enemy Within, you'll know the Trots really well. Now, the Trots have enormous kennels, arguably the largest kennels in Reikland, but they also have pretty much cornered the market in breeding demogryphs. Now, I'm not talking about demogryphs that you might try and take from the wild. There's various knightly orders that will only take wild demogryphs. They won't take ones that have been bred. But I definitely think that possibly we've got ourselves some demogryphs here as well that have been given as a mixture of gifts to the Duke, because obviously he's in a diplomatic position and gifts are common. But on top of that as well, it's about impressing people and showing things that the Empire can boast about, one of those being demogryphs. SD goes, Windheim has greenhouses with plants all over the world. Yes, it does. Themed from different continents, as I recall. And Lightman is a bit of a one-upper. Yeah, he is a bit, isn't he? Love goes good. I agree. A Dominion sorcerer goes true. The Empire is so different. I wouldn't at all think for instead of principality. Yeah, totally. And indeed, there was a discussion when we were writing some of the books to use terms like Furstentum and similar, and I will pronounce it terribly because obviously I'm Scottish. Furstentum? Let's just not even try. Furst. But yes, you're right. And we were discussing whether we should use Germanic phrases in general, or perhaps move towards High Germanic phrases for some older places. And in the end, most of the time we decided not to, largely because the primary audience for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is English speaking. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't enforce individual language versions, because then when translators came along and they did local versions, they would just translate it anyway. They're not going to be calling them princedoms or principalities. They're going to be immediately translating into their own languages. So it made it even less sensible to try and use Germanic terms in general, unless it was to create something that was thematically older, giving that idea that on Berrigan, the language of Sigmar's tribes, not the old on Berrigan, the one that they spoke originally, but the language that Reichsspiel itself came from, is very closely related to German, where the Reichsspiel that's spoken in the Empire, when you're reflecting that, you generally use, for example, English terms. Worth mentioning. Fred Slipknot goes, hi, Andy. Hi. So it's one of my favorite things. Yay! So happy back to being regular. Certainly bloody is. Inside the palace, the servant quarters all over the place. I was thinking that on the side that's empty by the front left wing, let me just pull out here. So the side that's empty in the front left wing, so we're talking this area here. This area here is going to be a large garden. I need to have somewhere that's relatively clean for people to do sports and similar in. As for there's going to be servant quarters all the way through this, so I'm not too worried about that. Yaka, how same lords, I think, tomorrow, got full griffs, indeed. And Dominion, oh, wait a minute. How some lords, let me just make sure. I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. I don't think I got your question right. I thought you were saying something else, but I've just realized you didn't got their full griffs. So are you saying, is this how they got all of their demogryphs, for example, and similar? House Trot, in my version, is responsible for some, but certainly not all of that. That's worth potentially drilling into. Dominion goes, true. The English fans of Warhammer are already put off as it is, but yeah, well, quite. In Bretonnia, it's the truth. And it's kind of funny when you look at all the very, very German names a lot of Imperial characters have. It is actually amusing. Drozier, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correct. Let's say I am. Where is the nearest holy pilgrimage site to Kalegen? Probably, well, there's actually a couple. I'm going to bring that one up, actually, because it's worth discussing. Let's bring up my reference map. Arise, O reference map. Right, so we have some exceedingly important holy sites by here. One of which is the Monastery of the Holy Word, which is the primary font for the Order of the Anvil. And this is where the Word of Sigmar itself is kept. And it is the center of Sigmarite law in all of the Empire. So, yeah, that's a pretty important location just over there. You also cannot stress enough how important Altdorf is to many pilgrims. Altdorf is a center of pilgrimage for many. So really, the most important point of pilgrimage is Altdorf. Also worth saying, though, Fang just sitting over on the Middenland side of the border, and that is an Ulrican location. You'll notice on the master map that the holy sites are marked with little eight-sided, eight-pointed stars. I mean, that's not dodgy, honest. 100% all right. So you also have the Monastery of the Eternal Watch. The Monastery of the Eternal Watch is a Sigmarite order, but it's not really a point of pilgrimage. So yeah, that's the obvious local areas. Let me just pull out there and go back to where we're going to be mapping. So I'm about to start in a moment. SD says servant quarters. Isn't that just another name for attics and basements? To a degree, yes. Yak says, try to get to the German version of Warhammer book, maybe. Yeah, I've got a couple of the German versions. I remember when I got gifted actually the German version of, say, the Tome of Salvation, for example. And I always find it fascinating to see what things they do and what things they do not translate. And when I became the producer for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, it was also fun. Speaking directly to the translators, discussing how they were translating certain rules and how it all came to pass. Indeed, I would argue that the Russian version of all editions, the Russian version of the core book, was by far the cleanest, better than the English version as well. It had all of the errata that was discussed already hard-coded into it, plus they asked an awful lot of questions about how the rule was supposed to be interpreted, and we had big, long discussions to make sure that they would pin it down directly. So yeah, it's always interesting seeing how other editions work, but as is often the case, I would say maybe a year after it got released, everyone was complaining to me about, say, the French one and the German one because of certain translation errors that sat in there. And often it's just down to small wordings over certain talents and how they express. Dominion comes in and says, looking at this part of what I assume is the master map makes the idea of staying away from German words even more funny. It does, doesn't it? Yellow goes, hello, hey, Yellow, man, delighted you made it. Well, no, we've just done our preamble discussion and it's been quite fun. Just got back from the grocery run, getting some GM prep for tomorrow. Good luck with the game tomorrow. I'm also having my game tomorrow. And for those of you who don't come and watch me, I'll be very disappointed to see you're not there. That's tomorrow at 7 p.m. UK time for the next episode of Lawhammer. I got a question. Yes. Who's scarier? Chaos. Well, all chaos. All chaos or Melchior? All chaos. Is that what you're asking? Well, because chaos is pretty freaking scary. All right. Anyway, before I get all caught up on trying to decide what's more frightening between one thing or another, let's get diving in. Right. So we've had quite a few suggestions for a much larger greenhouse up here, so that we can. Let me just zoom in here. Get myself a brush ready. I've got a brush ready, so that we can have some sort of equivalent to a botanic gardens in there for guests to come in, have a look at, be impressed by, maybe some nice trees leading up to it. So we're probably talking about coming from about there over to there with perhaps extra accesses coming in from either side. A couple of greenhouses sitting sort of there and there and there, and overlooking those greenhouses, under them, we can have ourselves some sort of green, some sort of open space, which can be used for our Warhammer equivalent of croquet, which can be played out in this area here. That leaves us with a section down below which doesn't have much in line for it. I don't have any strong preferences for what's there, so if you've got any ideas, now's the time to bring it up. I'm just going to dive straight into this section and start filling this out now. I'd like to quickly pop in a little bit of a road though before I go. So I want that to go over to our, there we go. I want that to come in that way too. And then over to there. That's all going to be guest quarters and royal households and similar. That can come into there, going down towards and around from there. So this is just marking out loosely where the roads are going to be, where our green is going to be in the center. Have some sort of muster flat area in front. Okay, I'm pretty cool with that. Right, so I'm going to quickly fill this out. I'm not going to paint it in, but I am going to put in some of the shapes so that we understand where everything is. If you have any further ideas for what should be here or connected to here, now is the time to mention it. We can have a larger one with some sort of nice dome sitting on the top of it. The number of times I was requested for a dome by Yalab is really not worth mentioning. It was a lot. Right, again, if my sound is a little bit off, please tell me, because I'm trying to make sure that my mic is close. Not used to my new mic yet, so quite likely I'll get parts of it wrong. Hopefully, though, that's good. As I said, though, I'm not going to do too much detailing yet. I'm just laying out where it's all going to be. Another house here. And we're going to need ourselves some sheds and similar sitting at the back. Okay, yep, that'll work. And then that can be all. So if we just pop in the edge to the road there, that means we can have our nice open green. Yeah, I'm not getting some. My eraser's too big. Let me just drop down the size of that to make this easier. There we go. And let's just pop that in as well. Okay, I'm all right with the shape. It doesn't seem too bad. Do we want anything like a fountain or some sort of raised central garden here? I'll just put a circle in for the moment. If you've got an idea for what that could be, do drop it in. I'm going to need to add a few extra roads at the back so this all makes sense. So I'll do that now. Let's get my roads and pop them in like so. And I want it to be grassy on the in-between with a side path like so. Yep, that works. Okay. I'll quickly pop in these shapes just so I can see where each of my main houses are. Yeah, okay. I like that. And then that can come up there. Perhaps have that go around a statue with a road going around it and then coming in across there and down towards there. Love it. Let me just add that little bit of road in. Road. Okay, I'm okay with the general shapes of where this all is. If anyone has any further ideas, do get them in. I'm about to move over to the comments so that we can see if there's anything else worth adding. Pretty okay with that. Just before I go into the comments, so I'll just add a little bit of the old green so that we've got some color in place and we can actually see what it looks like. Let me just pop those in. It's a bit minty. Let's make that a little bit more verdant. There we go. Now I'm just doing this pretty roughly. I'm not being very careful, just so I can get an idea of what we've got and where the green areas are and where the house areas are before we start doing the proper coloring in. We've got our little circular bit there, which is either flower beds or some equivalent. Just drop that in there and let me just fill that in like so. Hashtag cheat by using my paint bucket, and that will do to begin. Let's zoom out on that a little bit and then go look at the comments and see if there's anything further to add. Right, so first up, Yaki then goes, what do you think about Polish translations? I'm not up with the Polish translation, so I can't say about that. I agree. I absolutely agree as well. I'm not sure what I'm agreeing to, but yes, I agree. SD goes, chaos has to be simpler. Yeah, well, it really does. Probably. Richard goes, when you get your master map computer, that is. Yeah, totally. I agree entirely. Currently running a campaign in Ostland and Hochland. Ooh, good places to run a campaign. Lawhammering, maybe a jousting field for the nobles. I think we'll put that outside the city walls because I think that's going to give more space for the required lists. And I think it's something they will definitely want because that will impress. Richard adds, when you get your new computer, could you post an image of the master map for those provinces in Discord? I will definitely think about it, but they're right in the depths of the areas that I need to resolve for my upscaling issue I mentioned earlier. So I'll need to spend quite a bit of time rejigging all the little details in there. Time to build roads for our city in the Empire. Damn straight. Dominion goes, he domed you to get a dome. I did indeed. Hawk then goes, sound is still good. Excellent. Thank you. Wow, sound is still good. How well does it take my voice? Speaking a little bit more quietly. How's the whispers? Yalab goes, but you promised me a dome in the Grand Temple. We'll get one somewhere over there too. The sound is good. Good. Love is on the road. Ho, ho, ho. That'd be lovely. I'd like to give my group a side story in Ostland. Ostland's a great place to play, by the way. I love it. The Kislev Verge was a central component of one of my campaigns. That's the point when we moved from the oblasts into the trees of Ostland. Yalab, also, did we include any Estalian accents, the Lightman's wife at the palace? Not really, actually. And that might be worth having a little think on, Tillian. I have to admit, I'm behind most of the palace mapping. I'm not surprised. It was done over the last couple of streams. A gazebo! Can't go wrong with a gazebo. Lovers on the road. An exceedingly daring fountain. Esty then, oops, I missed Esty there. Some benches along the side, both for spectating the noble sport of croquet, or our equivalent of it, and for meetings in the open air. Raving then adds, good evening, everyone, and good evening to you, Raving. Delighted that you made it. Hawk Audley drops in, the whispers are good. Oh, good to hear. Whisper, whisper. It'd be hard to hear if there was other sounds, but by itself came through nicely. I love the road goes. Speaking quietly works very well as a contrast to the animated Andy voice. I apologize. Let's just say that I almost can't help myself unless I take a little pills. Question, does Kalegen have a coat of arms? It does. It's a crowned swan. Or would you plan to give it one? It's a crowned swan. It's already got one. And I see you're getting into... Here's what... I really do not want to be getting into that. Nobody wants to hear me whispering in. Okay, so we've had enough of a discussion there concerning what could or couldn't go in. We've had a daring fountain suggested. Oh, let me just get that up to full percentage and get onto the correct layer. There. Let me bring up the scale. View the grid, please. Show me the grid. In fact, that'll do. Show grid. Okay, so that's 10 yards. Oh, no, that's about right. Excellent. Just using these as tiny little benches and similar for folks to drop by. I'm probably going to leave most of this grassy area here sort of blank so that we can just have a large grass area. I'll add a little bit of detail when I put on some trees and similar. But for the actual area itself, I might have an area which is lawned out a little bit more cleanly than the rest. So I'll change the color of the green on that one slightly. So you get the idea that this place has been mowed down much more carefully. That's not enough. I'm going to have to go. Even that's not really enough. I might change the color tone a little bit. Still not enough. That's probably too much. It no longer looks green. Yeah, let's go for a just to give the idea that we've got ourselves a bit of a lawn that's been put in place. That's I would argue a little bit too bright in terms of the green. So Yeah, I might tone that down in a moment, but I'll worry about that in a moment. Let me just get everything else in place first. Too heavy. Okay, right. So glass house number 1. Let's just add some detail on that. Again, if you want to know why I'm mapping the way I'm mapping and why I'm putting the amount of detail or lack thereof, because there's not a lot of detail in some parts of this map, go check out my tutorial, which is over in Rookery Publications, for how to do maps like this one. If you can't find it, just ask and I will ping it all out for you. Let me just pop in some more of these. I'm not going to go too heavy in the detail. I don't know how many of you have been to Botanic Gardens. They tend to be relatively Victorian in appearance for the ones that you find here in the UK, with old Victorian glass houses with relatively large panes. There's a really nice one here in Edinburgh. I pop out to the Botanical Garden every once in a while. Okay, we've got ourselves the basics for this. I'm going to do the color on this as well, since we've done this pretty quickly. So let me just pull the color. We'll make one of the, I don't need to change the color. What am I doing? I just need to go down to the other layer. I'll make one of the Botanic Garden style glass houses a feature location. Or do I want to mark them all? I'm not sure. I think one of them will probably do. We can do a write-up for one of them and leave the rest of them as mentioned in the description, but not given a full write-up. So that'll do nicely. Just pop some color on this. Once I've done the color, I'm going to check the comments again. So if you've got any other ideas for this section before we move on, that's the time to tell me. And once I've checked the comments, I will just dive straight into doing some highlights and shades on these, and then we'll move out of this area and move up to the bottom, move down to the bottom of this section of gardens and decide if there's anything else that we want to add to that. I'm keeping this all relatively low on detail to make it super easy. Just pop those in. A little bit of brown in those just because it lets them pop a little. Right. That'll do. Okay. That's everything. Sort of is. Huh. Okay. Before I do the highlights and shades, I'll check the comments. Let's see what we got. Slanesh approves, always does. Raven comes in and says, just watched the Lord Beer stream from Nagash. Excellent. One question spawned in my head. If the Black Pyramid is dangerous, why did no one try to destroy it, etc.? Looks like a good candidate for this. That's a very good question that we definitely didn't cover. And I think it's a good question for multiple reasons, because we've got ourselves an enormous Black Pyramid down in the land of the dead that is yanking the winds of magic like crazy. And that could be the answer. There isn't an officially provided one. I'm sure that there might be one at some point. Not really good for this stream though, because I'll wax lyrical about it for ages, because I do have theories. Yab goes au contraire. I think the whispering is a potential career pivot if things go south. I can always do something else. I'm a man of many hats. No apologies needed there. Thank you very much for saying so. Love. Law Armor is funny. Love this guy. Oh, thanks, Hugh. You're the best. More of those sort of comments. Hawk comes in. There should be some trees. There will be. We'll do the trees when we finish. We always do the trees at the last section of our detailing for this. Love on the road goes. I'm crying from laughing here. Glad to hear that. Mowed down the steam-driven mower we discussed last time. Oh, yeah, we can't miss our steam-driven mower. I had a Nagash pyramid question as well. What's on the other side of the world to the Black Pyramid? Does the area suffer from magic deficit because of the draw of it? No, absolutely not. The world is huge. The Warhammer world is far bigger than the real world. And whilst, yes, there is a significant amount of draw of magic to the Black Pyramid, in the greater scheme of the world, it's a tiny thing. It's a blip on the overall world compass. Love is on the road. Goes really enjoying the Rookery mapping streams. Very educational. Thanks. Grom Brindle the Ancestor. Great to see you, good old white dwarf. Andy, what's your opinion on the new Warhammer DLC trailer? Well, that's a stream in and of itself, isn't it? So yeah, I was I actually just watched that the other day. And I'm sort of the opinion that I might want to do a separate stream in it. I'm actually interested to see what you all think, because I think having a little discussion about it might be worthwhile, because that's some parts of it I love, but some parts of it I was a bit meh about. Now, I haven't played, which is why I come at this with a slightly different view. Hardly any Warhammer 3 at all. Indeed, once I've got my new PC, I'm intending on streaming playing it just to see what it's like. Tell the truth, I've already downloaded it, tried it out on this PC. It works fine, so I might stream that sooner rather than later. And my first impression when I switched on the new game and I gave it a quick go was, is that an Ungol? As the first Ungol hits the screen, and he's white as a sheet, looking more like a Gospodar. And I'm like, that's not an Ungol. That's not an Ungol. What's going on here? So I immediately started bitching, as is I kind of do that. And when I was watching that trailer, I sort of did the same thing. Wait a minute. Look at those Zangor. Those Zangor look kind of boring. They don't look very Zangor-esque at all. And to a degree, we're sort of spoiled because there's some really nice Zangor, or an equivalent at least, that's been created for Age of Sigmar. But I did find them particularly dull. I understand. They've only got so many models that they can do, but holy shit, they could have done a better job there. Having said that, though, there was so much awesome in that trailer as well. And I'm a bit of a fan of the Changeling. So, yeah, I might do myself my own little stream on that, just for like a quick half-hour one at some point, just because it was fun to watch. It's also interesting to see what you get inside the DLC. I do have one loose comment for those of you who are playing the game, though. Do you think it's expensive? Because it looked really expensive to me. So let's move on. SD. Do noble families of the Empire have origin stories, real or imagined, related to the gods in some way, similar to how the Julie of ancient Rome said that they were descended from Venus? Yes, and it almost all ties down to Sigmar. Take, for example, the young Freuds, who are a core component of the Lawhammer streams that we have playing. The young Freuds claim descendancy directly from Sigmar, and also claim that Sigmar was born up by Ubersreich, which is where they hold land. Build a fort, says Hugh, at Lawhammer. I was in build another fort on this particular map. Not quite sure what you're referencing, or is that just in reference to an earlier comment? I feel like an idiot. Maybe a bowling green, says General Caster. Yeah, I like the idea that they're using these lawns for different things. I'm not liking my pale green here too much, so you're almost certain to see this one vanish while I add in a little bit of extra detail afterwards. But yeah, I quite like the idea that our green here is being used for, let me just quickly sort that while I'm at it. There we go. That our green here is being used for potentially multiple different things. I've still got a little bit of darkness there. Huh. I'll worry about that later. Hawk comes in and says, I've lost my mouse. Let me just bring it over here. There is a state army fort southeast of Kalegen. Yes, there is, down at the bottom. And if that's what you're referencing earlier, Hugh, we've already got a particularly big one. In fact, I will just very quickly show it to you because you may not have seen it already. That's it down here. It's state army barracks, and it's a big one. Let me just get rid of the extras there so the lines aren't in the way. Pop that back. Sin pops in. Hello, Sin. Do you think Glasgow or Edinburgh is a better city to live in? I live in Edinburgh, so clearly that's the better city. I don't care about objectivity. It's that simple. Anyone out there who lives in Glasgow, I apologize. Yalla pops in for Lady Halskrug. I think we made a connection to the castle with the idea that she takes command of the troops while Lightman is away. Correct. Maybe something linked to that at the palace. Give me an example of what you think would work for that isn't already potentially covered by the shapes that we've got in place. Hugh then adds, that's very good, and thank you, not a problem. Dominion then pops in and says, lots of statues are always a good option for areas, meant to be more garden-y. Yeah, we've got quite a lot of statues in other places as well. I'd like this place to have a slightly different tone. And by that, I mean there's statues all the way through the main courtyard here. They're lining the front of the building here further. Oops, as go down here. Whoopsie. We also have an entire area dedicated down here to statues and gardens and looking pretty. So I would prefer not to do another one just because my mouse is now automatically grabbing. There we go. I'd rather not do another if we can avoid it, just so that we can give each area a slightly different tone for the descriptions that we give. Alternatively, we talked about a pavilion for her to patron arts and host events. Yeah, that's a good idea. We did discuss that, and I'd forgotten about it completely. Good call, Yalab. That might be worthwhile putting down in the southern section, since we haven't done the southern section yet. We've got an area here that we can immediately move into. Quite like the idea of that, indeed. Grombrindle, the ancestor, goes, do it. I presume that means for the stream about discussing it. I'm pretty sure I probably will. You're very welcome. Thank you. Excellent. Hawk then pops in and says, should do one with Sotek and have a Total War experience from him. Yeah, I'm going to be doing that at some point. I'm going to play the game a couple of times so I can get an idea of how it works under my belt, because the last time I played Total War was so long ago I can barely remember it. Also, he probably doesn't want me bitching in his ear about all the things that they've changed that I don't like. We all, after all, have our single preferences for parts of the old world or the whole Warhammer world and how it's represented. Total War takes liberties with certain things for very good reasons. And that's that they have a limited number of models they can put on screen, or because they've only got a limited amount of locations that they can name on their maps. As a cartographer, the maps always make me cry. And I have a similar issue with species or races or whatever that I've written. Take, for example, the Kislevites. I wrote an enormous amount of material for those, for the fantasy roleplay game, and much of what was turned into the Kislev that's presented inside Warhammer 3 is based on some of my work. And when that's changed, you can't help but go, why did they do that? Well, simultaneously, when something's changed for the better, you can't help but go, yes, this is amazing. Stream is cool. Okay, well, we'll have to do it, eh? Moving down to Dominion, a little bird told me that Lawhammer and Sotek should do a multiplayer. Well, yeah, that might indeed happen. I think that I like the DLC, but I think it's too expensive. Yeah, I think I may be in the same point area. How it looked, yeah, quite. Dominion then goes, a little bird lied to you, they will do one. Yellow then adds, and if we like the ladies' ancestry, maybe a section in the garden with exotic plants. Yeah, I think that we can have that run through the botanic garden side as well. This new DLC, I'm going to move off the DLC for the moment because I'll just end up talking about it for ages. It's annoying that the Empire in Total War still has, doesn't. Okay, let's just don't get me started on that. Quite. Hawk Oddly says, sadly, that I'm going to move off our Total War bits. Yep, and still moving along. The fort looks really nice. It does look really nice. I'm really quite pleased with how that one landed. Mel Hodlol. I've literally no idea. Hey Andy, what's the status? What you're working on right now in terms of this map here? I'm working on the palace at the north of Kalegen. If you want more details, either go to earlier in the stream or ask for specifics. You're still speaking to someone else. I'm moving off my Total War. Evening, Andy says the plebiscite. Hello, the plebiscite. How about a tennis court or badminton, perhaps? We could perhaps move that towards the back or some equivalent, although I'm still pretty convinced that all the kennels and similar would work better there for that. Grombrindle, the ancestor. Can't even say the word ancestor now. Name your top 5 vacation spots in Warhammer anywhere, even the realm of Slaanesh, if you fancy. Well, how about I do that while I do the next part of the map? I haven't managed to catch any stream beyond this one. That's fair, Dominion. So there are, for those of you who've missed it, 16 other parts, and they range from just a couple of hours all the way up to a couple of 7-hour marathons, which were truly extensive. They are actually, I think, great mostly. A couple of them I was kind of tired, so I'm like rah, 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 garbling into the mic. But there's some extremely cool lore talk in there as we discuss out the different ways that the city can be used. If you are playing in any game where you're potentially games master or something like in fantasy roleplay, well worth dropping in those. Or if you just like lore, well worth dropping in them. Right, anyway, I'm going to pop down here and put in my highlights and my shades first, add in a little bit of extra detail, and then once I have done that, let me just check what we've got. That's way too thick. There we go. That brush will do just fine. There we go. So, simple highlights and shades. If you want to know how I'm doing this and how it all works, I did a tutorial for it over in Rookery Publications, as I've said on more than one occasion. Strongly recommend you go have a look at that because it's a freaking awesome tutorial and it does the job perfectly. I'll pop up a link for that later. I'm also doing myself a tutorial for how to write up locations this Saturday at 7 p.m. over in Rookery Publications. I strongly recommend, if you are a budding writer, that you drop by because we're going to have a lot to say about how you can write up cities just like Kalegen in an effective, fast way rather than the classic way, which is really slow. Find the bit you like, write a lot about that one, and then never actually finish doing all your write-ups because you got so caught up in doing one location, wrote 7,000 words in it, and kind of half guilt yourself into thinking the other 100 locations need the same. So yeah, I'm going to be doing that. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's this Saturday. Let's have a quick check if there's anything else that I want to add here in terms of shade. No, not really. This is a pretty easy place. Let's get onto my tree layer. Again, if you want to know how the trees are done, I've covered this in a previous stream. It is really easy. Let's add ourselves a couple of trees at the corners. And there. I want to drop down in size. And that's too small. Do that up before I go on. Now, I'm not going to do very much with this. I'm going to do enough to give it a little bit of character and not that much more. Give the idea that there's some topiary, some bushes that look impressive, some parts that you can sit under that look nice. I'm going to drop down the opacity on that. Enough for character, but not enough to dominate and make it difficult to see where the roads are. As I've discussed on several of the previous streams, it's quite important when you're doing maps of this ilk that you don't do too much because it becomes very difficult to read the maps. And ultimately, this is a tool. This is a map that's meant to be used by people to understand the location and give an idea for them for what it might be like if their characters are moving through it. And that's really, really difficult to do if you spend loads of time making it look absolutely accurate. I think the best example of this, so that you understand it as an analogy, it's the one that I've used multiple times in the previous streams as well. And that's if you imagine yourself a typical Warhammer city with all of those Warhammer houses. And as we all know, in the Empire, those houses are stacked up high and often leaning against each other by the roofs, leaving not wide streets, but streets at the bottom, stacked layers of a house above, and then the roofs meet at the top, meaning that if you draw that, you can't see any of the streets because it's just all roofing everywhere. And that makes for an absolutely terrible map because you look at it and you've no idea where the streets are, you've no idea how to get around. And if you're a player trying to figure out what it's like for your characters, or if you're a GM trying to figure out what the characters are going to see as they make their way through the city, the only details you've really got for that are roofs and lots of roofs, which is useless. I'll also add that the same goes here for, now I'm going to say something here that's potentially deeply controversial because I love these, and that's for isometric maps. Now, you've probably all seen some really gorgeous isometric maps where you can see that it's almost like a shot of above of a town, and you look at it and you see all the buildings, and you can see the tall buildings, the mid-sized buildings. You get a really good sense of what the place might be like. But often, particularly for role-playing games, they're less useful than they initially appear. They're really good at evoking the place and giving you an idea of what it looks like, but they're terrible to get you from A to B. And if you're a GM that really quite likes knowing how to get from A to B, those maps are going to be pretty much useless to you. Depends on the map. Some do it better than others, but the vast majority don't do it frightfully well. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of trees, marking off these areas here. Give you that idea that this place is I like that. This place is going to feel a bit more real now. I'm going to use my line layer just to drop a couple of darker lines. That's too dark. Don't like it. Just a couple, just to give the idea that there's a few areas that are being used. I'll also get that brush, make it a bit bigger. Let me see what that looks like. Yeah, perfect. Go into my color layer. and just dirt off a couple of areas to give the idea it's been a bit worn out in the middle where it's being played. I'll re-green some of that because it's a bit strong. This place is meant to look impressive. Just change of color just a little bit, not much. There we go. That'll do. Okay, so we've got a strong idea of what this little section looks like. I'm also going to go down here before I start to the comments and make ourselves our building out here that Lady Hall's crew can use for entertaining guests, being a patron of the arts and similar. An enormous conservatoire. It's not really a conservatoire. It's not being used for instruments per se. But yeah, a nice place where she can impress folks. And I'm going to make it, I'm not going to make it in brown. I'm going to make it in black. There we go. Let's just drop in well, that's a little bit too steep. That's more like what I was looking for. Okay, there's going to have to be a way to get to that. So I'm going to draw that road in once I've quickly resolved the shape of it. And once I've done that, I'm going to go back to the comments, check if there's anything else there. Oh, one thing I didn't do while I'm doing this is discuss my holiday destinations in the Warhammer world. Right, so I wouldn't like to go to the Warhammer world, if I'm being absolutely honest. It's a terrible place full of horrible magics and nasty monsters and disasters around every corner. And unless you yourself happen to be, I don't know, a Cathane dragon or something so impressive that you're going to nagash your way out of any of your problems, you're almost certainly heading towards some type of doom. Is there, though, a lot of places that I would love to see? More places that I can really shake a stick at, because I've been growing up with the Warhammer world pretty much my entire life. And in that time, I've imagined many of the places and indeed written about many of the places. I kind of have a very clear idea of what they're like, particularly given that I have role-played for almost all of my life as well. And part of role-playing is taking people to all of these places. And when you take them there, you obviously imagine it, you get an idea of what it's like, and you get favorites. One place that I absolutely love, and this might come as a bit of a surprise, is Nagaroth. Absolutely adore Nagaroth and Nagarond in particular. I've used that location more times than I care to mention. And whilst I admit not necessarily the best place to visit, I would still love to see it. I've got such a clear idea in my head of what it's like, but to actually see it would be completely different. A little bit like the first time you see any version of one of the locations that you like, and you see it on a computer screen for a computer game or something similar, and you see locations that you know, and you're like, oh, look at that, look at that. It would be like that for me. Altdorf, much less so for me, because Altdorf is a location that I've been playing in for so long. I have such a clear view. I don't actually need anyone to tell me what it looks like. I know. I'm very, very certain what it looks like. And anyone who tries to tell me it looks different can get tea. I know what this place is like. And my version of it, though, is quite different for example, the Altdorf book that was recently released. I have a very, very different version of Altdorf in my mind. I've written for it for my own games multiple times and written about it for official books multiple times as well. And that has done nothing more than reinforce what the entire place looks like to me in my mind, if not necessarily anywhere else. So I'd love to see Nagrond. I'd love to see Laverne. I've got a very clear idea of what that looks like. I would love to see, what else would I love to see? Really love to see, rather than just making up shit. What sort of, I mean, most of the things, because I've role played with them so much, I don't have the necessary need to see them, because I've got I mean, what would the vortex of magic look like? That'd be pretty goddamn funky to see. I'm going around the world in my head. Wouldn't mind seeing the lore layer on the River Reich, even though it is kind of based upon the equivalent in Germany. And to a degree, my youngest daughter gets her name, Lorelei, from that. I'm just going to immediately purple this up. I see no reason not to just get this in place, and then we can have a quick discussion about anything else that may lie around it. And no one's got any ideas, I'll just fill up that area with okay, why didn't that come on? That's because I'm on the road layer. Idiot. There we go. Yeah, if anyone's got no other ideas, I'll just fill it up with trees and a bit of green, and then we'll be done there. Okay, so once I've done this little building here, I'm just going to pop into the comments. Yeah, so I find it really hard to choose anywhere. I mean, I'd love to, no, none of the lands of the dead particularly interest me. You know what? I'd really love to see some of the places that haven't really been discussed. You know, like End, for example. Places that are almost fables. I have a strong idea of what Nippon looks like now, which, of course, Games Workshop's going to overwrite, because I've been building that for my own games, which has been surprisingly fun. Let's just pop this in as well. That's way too big. Okay. There we go. Right. So, quick highlight. Be done with that, and then check the comments. There we go. That'll do. Let's comment on. Okay, General Caster. Speaking of Gombradal, I'll move on. Richard Allen finally watched the first episode stream of the Anyway the campaign last night. Oh, did you love it? Oh, thanks, Richard. Thanks for saying so. Our sound is pretty poor for about the first 4 or 5 episodes when we were trying to figure stuff out. I will warn you. I end up replacing every single last mic in that room because the sound was so mediocre. We also found out, rather amusingly, we had echoes, and we couldn't figure out why we had echoes all over the place. We eventually found out it's because our amp was set to echo mode. So let's just not think about that. That's just embarrassing. But really happy you liked it. I think the campaign, it goes a bit up and down. I think it starts really well. Our individual adventures are really good. Then I got really ill. So be aware there's a few episodes where I'm so ill I can barely talk. Everyone tells me that no one could tell I was ill. I could tell I was ill. But after that, it's all settling in really nicely now, I think. Goal Bomb goes. I have a question about the 4th ed books. Interesting. Which ones do you recommend to buy? If you're starting off, get yourself a core book, get yourself a starter set, and then work from there. Yalla pops up. I long for the times when we have more hours than chatters in streams. I have no idea what you're talking about. All we do is chatter. The blood monster made me think of the Nurgle thing in Tamarkin that possessed people. Yeah. Nice one. Yeah. The bloody mutant. Yeah, totally. Do you know the Tamarkan thing when you put that? I wasn't actually thinking. I did know about it. I wasn't thinking of that, actually. Tamarkan and that entire campaign is a part of our campaign. It's part of our campaign's history. It has already occurred. And you'll find if you carry on with the episodes, you're going to catch a few small mentions to it and also the repercussions for it. It may not be immediately obvious, but it becomes more obvious over time because down in the Border Princes, where the Horde passed through, they left a big, let's say, vacant void and something moved in to fill it. Mel, I still can't pronounce your name. Mel Hodlol, are you doing in-depth lightning for the home app? Yeah, damn straight I am, but I'm not really doing it more than what I've currently done, which is a very quick highlight, a very quick shade. If I was doing this professionally, so for example, I've worked for obviously Warhammer 40k, Critical Role, Call of Cthulhu, Fantasy Flight Games, a whole bunch of other companies. I'm doing it professionally. I'll obviously Hunters Entertainment, Darrington Press, Space Hulk. I would spend more time, but this one is working towards a very simple, easy to replicate style that I did on a tutorial over on Rookery Publications. Love's on the road. I need that writing stream. Excellent. I was very on the nose with that description bit. So yes, the writing stream is going to be great. That's this Saturday. You should come along to it. It's on Rookery Publications. Go look for Inside the Rookery on Patreon if you want to join in. You need to be a Brazen Rook. I'd love to know what you think of the new Kislev and Cathay. That's a separate stream. Because I'm going to go to town on both of them. I have lots of good to say. I always find that the place in the park on the green is usually a great place for a gathering point like a pergola. Yeah, quite. or we can relax, mix things up. I imagine war is intense. It is. And the need for relaxation, even greater. Agreed. Reikland. Could it be the Rhineland? Really isn't. It may have started off as obviously being some sort of analog of that, or alternatively, the Reichland. But in time, it has effectively become much more and strongly influenced by English speaking people, so thus from their cultures rather than from the German speaking cultures that were the initial source. Evening all, hello Harin, delighted to see you. TBC, I'm running a Naggaroth game. Yeah, I love a Naggaroth game. Wish I had more to go on for the landscape and society, yet me too. I imagine there'll be a book about that coming out soon. Just got into the chat, delighted to see you here. Did we keep the Hermit Mystic? I'm not convinced that we did, but we can perhaps add that in when we do the descriptions over on Discord. Grombrindle, the ancestor, says, I watched, Karazakarak, pre-invasion. See, pre-invasion dwarves, and possibly even going all the way back to just on the edges of the old ones. I think that'd be super fascinating when they were at the peak of their technology, when their gods, the ancestors, were still alive, and you weren't looking at dwarves as trying to recapture the past. You're looking at dwarves being a forward-thinking species. That would be very interesting. And General Castellad's Reikland's always struck me more as the Austrian part of the Holy Roman Empire analog. I mean, yeah. I find it hard to really see it as being an analog of anything in the real world anymore. It used to be, but it moved quite some distance beyond that original setup. So let's just turn this in green first. Super easy to do. We'll add a little bit of texture around about it, a couple of small housey bits. We've not had any strong suggestions for anything in this area, so I'm just going to put in a couple of houses that could be almost anything. Perhaps one of them may even be a location in time. Let me just check what brush I've got. Yep, that's what I want, and let's get that in black. So I'm going to put a couple along the walls. Have one sitting off towards the side. We'll have ourselves a path that runs all the way around. So let me get that. We can have that be a meandering path around the outside that connects through. Like so. Let's get ourselves a little bit of that as well. Love it. And let's just add in a little bit of detail and be done with this. Bum, bum, bum. Oops, I'm wrong. Okay, a bit of road going around. Let's get rid of that and that so we can have it connect. Again, keeping this relatively simple, quite the opposite of the gardens that we've got on the other side, where we've got far more formalized, pretty looking gardens with lots of beds for flowers, a maze, and the like. I'm going to put more formalized gardens on the outside of the city walls as well, backing onto the palace, but we're going to make this quite a broad, easy strolling area. This is more the pleasure side. Put a couple of buildings in that I will connect with road in just a moment. If anyone sees anything else they think they should be in here, do not hesitate to drop it in as a comment, and I will likely add it. Just going to add a tiny amount of building color onto those to ground those into place. Nice. Give myself a couple of road. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to take out a couple of sections and then road. Okay, cool. We definitely have something that looks like something here now. I'm going to add in a quick bit of shades and highlights just in those bits, add some trees, and then we can discuss if there's anything else that should go in there. And if there isn't, we will go to the background where we've got our kennels to add. And similar, not much to add on these. Just a little bit of shadow on the inside of the water. Let's go to highlights now. It's a little bit bright, but whatever. Okay. Bit of building color in those sections. Then I'll add in a bit of trees and we can be done with this, at least for the moment. Yeah, trees. Prefer it full. Come on, there we go. Okay, sort of looking like a place. Let's quickly check the comments before I move on from this. Alrighty, by this point, it's very much his own thing considering how many decades of lore. Agreed completely. That's regarding the Warhammer world in general as well. Could you exaggerate upon Nagaroth? How is it like there? Is perceiving Ulthuan as Brits and Nagaroth as... No, it really isn't. I have strong words to say in this one. Are Black Arts aircraft? No. Are the Cowboys the old ones? No. So there's a common thread on seeing that there's some form of UK versus, or not even UK, USA versus others. It makes a very poor analogy for the USA. Very poor, and it's a massive stretch. If you want to really think of what the Dark Elves are like, you're far better going to classic fantasy settings, like, for example, Michael Moorcock's Melnibonians. That gives you a far stronger idea of what your Ulthuani elves and your Nagarothi elves, your Azure and your Druki are actually like. I do not think they make a particularly good analogy for anything that's a real world analog. Nagaroth itself is so vastly different. Melhodilol, I'm changing how I pronounce that each time. You need a shed for tools to groom the trees and the shrubberies. I'm going to assume that some of these small side buildings that I've mocked out are exactly that. Maybe a pond, small boat lake. I did put a tiny pond on there. It is particularly small, though. It's not more than around about 15 yards over. Andy, will you ever publish Kalegen when it's finished? No, I won't. I don't hold the rights to publish anything for Games Workshop. All I can do is just publish fan material like everyone else that works on it. And that goes up on things like my World Anvil account. So you'll find that all the stuff that we do for Kalegen will be going up on World Anvil free for everybody to access. So that's not something that we're ever going to be publishing. If someone hired me to do it, sure, I'd do that. Be easy. Super easy job. After Kalegen is done, you continue. Yes, definitely. There's been a lot of pressure to do Altdorf. That might occur. We'll see. Black Arts could be very well be couriers of floating cities, huge things with big beasts. I mean, if you want to see them as that, they were never really designed as that, though. They're giant freaking castles that broke off of Ulthuan. They do have kept swans, right? Definitely. Swans all over the place in this place. Mel Huddle also says, what would a map of the Wrathgate look like? And the gate and maybe a bit of blood for charm. Slightly beyond what we're doing for this one, so I'm going to leave that one for the moment just because I'll go off on a tangent and last forever. I know you've probably finished the large yard in front of the palace, but wouldn't a massive pond with fountains be kind of impressive structure like when we would want guests to see as they enter? Yes, we already have a few of those as they're working their way up towards the castle itself, and why is it stuck? It's not meant to stick like that. I don't like that in the slightest. Where's my brush gone? There it is. Yes, so we've already got several of them kicking around, so I don't feel a strong need to add too much more. Or is the art plan for parades and such? Oh, you mean the big one that's sitting out the front? Yes, that is absolutely for what it's for. I misunderstood what part you meant. That's for loads of troops to fill. We don't want anything out there except for what they want to put there, which for some might be a display of strength. For others, most certainly won't be. It can also be an open space that can be used for a variety of other things, including showing that they're patrons of the art for a variety of different things. Petition for Lawhammer to be pronounced Love Hammer. Oh, yeah. A big oak. I imagine maybe one of these is a big oak, but we already have a strong tree component all the way down. Oh, let me just change that because my Photoshop's being a nit. It's grabbing every time. Stop that. It's really annoying. It's making moving really difficult. I'm going to have to zoom out. My brush is being a pain in the neck. We have a big tree down here with many a story attached to it, including the fact that there's some pretty ancient spirits involved. So, yeah, nothing else that I particularly feel needs to be added to that. A tangent about the Dark Gods domain that lasts forever. That sounds exceptionally Lorak. It really does, doesn't it? I mean, I won't stop. I'll just start and just will never come back. Taika then has understood that comedic strip was a bit too much. Still going to try to fit my cowboy hats and some dark elves. If you want something that have cowboy hats, go to the origin of the cowboy hats themselves. The drovers that worked their way across Europe from various Eastern European countries. You know, you'll find that the whole concept of a cowboy hat did not originate in America. So if you want to have yourself drovers and equivalent to cowboys, you're far better moving over to places like Ostermark and Ostland. There's a lot of good potential for that there. I remember when I first found that out when I was writing the drover for the second edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and I was like, there's nothing new under the sun. Anyway, why is there mistrust between the Azur and the Azrai? There have been no conflict in lore. Oh, there's a lot of mistrust between them. Why? That's a completely separate stream. That's one that I think I could drill into for a long time. To cut a long story short, they have completely different end goals in mind, and there's not a lot of love lost between them. I mean, there's a lot of links between them too, it's worth saying, but not a lot of love lost. Does the town have a theatre? Yes, there's going to be multiples of them, but we haven't really worked our way through the middle and upper class districts yet. So when we have done so, they'll be added in. Pardon me, there. Hugo's. Well, take care, Lawhammer. You take care too. See you in the next live stream. I'll see you in the next one too. Do feel free to watch any of the previous ones if you need a little extra dose out there. Maybe somewhere for jousting, I think that work. Jousting tournaments and horse and lance. Yeah, I agree. And that's going to be on the outside of the city up to the north. And Hugh then says, just to make sure you all know, to the chat, take care out there, man. And SD goes, the Azure completely abandoned the true elves of the continent, worthy of some distrust for sure. That's true, but I would not call the Azrai particularly true examples of elves. They have moved considerably beyond what they once were, although you could argue they're not enormously different to begin with from, say, Avalorni elves from the Ten Kingdoms, well, from Avalon. They move beyond that significantly. They're quite a different manifestation of them. Right, so we don't have anything else necessarily showing to go here, so I am going to leave it for the moment with my own little awareness that I might end up adding some extra detail later towards this, but not yet. I'm going to add a little bit of a drop that down. And a little bit of variation in there. Right, so we're going to do kennels at the back here with a little gatehouse that leads into them. These are not going to be the biggest, most extensive kennels. They're not going to really be big enough. Let's have a quick check of our scale. Bring up, show the grid, please. So, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So you're still looking around about 60 meters there by about 20. It's not tiny. It's not a big area, though. Not for creatures like demogryphs, which need a lot of leg room, so to speak. So, yeah, I'm going to make these sizable-ish in terms of what they represent for our kennels. Let me just get that on. Oops, get my color correct. So we've added that. We're going to have a road that connects directly to that. Underneath the wizard's tower, I would like it to be clear, and clear there as well. So we're going to have ourselves one there, one going off there, another off there. Let's leave some space at the back so the light will be coming out. So any who come into this part are going to be caught up with noises of various types. Let's keep that relatively low and down. Do I want anything else? I don't think I do. I think I just want the idea that this is sort of a loose, dirty area at the back. Let's put on our roads so that we've got them in place, and then just fill in this area pretty swiftly. I don't think this is going to take very long at all. And once we've got this in place, our palace is almost done. I want a bigger brush. This is taking far too long. Far too lazy to be doing it this way. There we go. Figure out what's in there in a second. Excellent. Okay, let's get my lines back. Okay, so the huntsman will have his cottage sitting here. Various kennels sitting out to the back, not even. Yeah, I can sort of see them in my mind's eye, what they look like. Small runs that can be taken out to the front. That's almost big enough for open air. It's not very many though, so we're probably only talking about, in total, about 10 demogryphs that are owned by the Hallskrugs. Not very many. With a potential for more at a later date, I imagine. Okay, that'll work. Let's just fill this in super fast. And then once we've done that, we can see if there's anything else we're going to do. We're currently sitting at the 1 hour 40 mark. As I said, today's one's going to be pretty short because I am feeling pretty poorly. Not ill per se, just caught up with a cold, and I don't want it to bring me down. I would like to be better by tomorrow, which means a good night's sleep. Okay, so that's going to be the kennels. This is going to be the grifferys here. The huntsman doesn't require his building to be special. We can just mark that there. And whilst I'm here, I'll also mark out the tower here that's on the city wall on the outside. I think there's another one to fill in too. There is. I'll fill that in as well. And while I'm here, I'll color in the wall. The wall color is yellow to make sure it's super easy for us to pick it out when we're looking at the map as a whole. Before I start coloring those sections in, well, doing the highlight and shade, that is, I'll do a quick check in the comments. We went over the lines there. I'll tidy that up in a second. And as I've mentioned multiple times in the tutorial, which I obviously recommend you should all go have a look on Inside the Rookery, being neat and tidy isn't the most important thing here. The most important thing is getting it all in place. Right, so that's not location, building color. There we go. Right, is that all the buildingy bits popped in? Yes, it is. I'll do the highlights and shades once I've checked the comments. So let's run down. SD. All elves calls themselves true elves. So true. Elves, gotta love them. The Druki are the true elves, as are the Azir, as are the Aenir, as are the Azrai. Thank you, very welcome. You awesome. Oh, thank you. It says, hi, yes. How big is Aminar? And is he as big as, I'd say he's at least 10 times the size. Andy, did you see Cubicle 7 announcement? Gen Con, High Evolvement book confirmed, Dwarf book also confirmed, both in development. Not a surprise. I also wouldn't be surprised if there isn't a 4.5 new version of the rules coming out soon as well. I believe it was even asked at Gen Con. The fact that it hasn't come out yet sometimes stuns me. So I imagine that's probably coming pretty soon too. As in the High Elf Ulthuan book, I don't think that's one that will be particularly useful for me. And that's not because I'm not doing Ulthuan, it's because their version of what elves will probably be quite different to mine. The dwarf book, though, I imagine will be very similar to what I would imagine dwarves are. So I imagine the dwarf book may be of more interest to me. Yaka then adds, you nerds of the true elves. So totally, that's what they think. Hiran then adds, everybody knows that the true elves are the fish people. Correct. Yaka says, what's the yellow wall color? It's literally the yellow wall color. It's to make it super easy to pick out the walls if you're looking at the map overall. Rogan then says, watching the stream and painting models really says something about how these densely packed cities are basically never shown in war games of any kind. A huge shame in my opinion, and I 100% agree. So here's something that a lot of you might not know. You may know if you've ever read any of my ancient blogs, but I used to run a club a bajillion years ago, a Warhammer club. We called it the Warhammer Club, but it wasn't just for Warhammer. It's for role-playing games, board games, mostly role-playing games and war games. And my mum, of all people, used to make scenery. Hi, Mum, if you're out there. And she ended up making scenery for the studio at one point as well. This is all the way back in the early 90s. And she made them some Space Marine helmets. But one of the great things about that was that she made me a ton of scenery. And I do mean a lot. I had a full-scale replica of Castle Drachenfels. I had several of the inns that you find in the various Warhammer Fantasy roleplay adventures. To cut a long story short, we could build ourselves a city with about 150 buildings in it. And that felt enormous. But in comparison to some of the buildings that you would get, obviously, in a bigger place like this isn't even the biggest city in the Warhammer world by any stretch. It's only around about 10 to 15,000 people, as I recall. And just look how big it is by comparison. Let me just get rid of all the lines there. Literally hundreds and hundreds of buildings. But what normally happens with a Warhammer battle is that you just get the wall, maybe a couple of buildings, and then all the open space so you can fight your battles. But yeah, I agree. The war game tends to be relatively rubbish at showing the true scale of what Warhammer cities are like. Azrai and Azur, the natural enemies. Natural. Like Azrai and Druki. Or Azrai and Azrai. Damn, that's right. They ruined Athaloran. I'm not going to disagree. City battles could be day-long events. Absolutely. There was originally a set of rules for Warhammer 3rd edition called Warhammer Siege. There was an equivalent that was made later, but it didn't have quite the same idea. But Warhammer Siege for 3rd edition Warhammer had a set of rules that would actually take days to play out if you played it out properly. But it took months of time to actually play the game. It was surprisingly fun. I played that one quite a lot back in the 80s. Love is on the road. Definitely rest well. People cannot mind your head on what you map if you're past your perishable date. Agree completely. I am being sensible these days. Richard then adds, have you taken a look at the hard maps by Columbia? Yeah, I've seen them. They're not an inspiration, but they're certainly something that has pleased me multiple times. We're getting Marienburg too. Don't forget Marienburg. I originally had Marienburg on the slate for releases. My releases, which were announced at, here we go. Where did I announce this? This is at Warhammer Fest 2019, maybe 2020, 2019. I'm going to say 2019. That was ages ago. Holy crap. That's like, it's almost 5 years ago, I imagine. It might be 2018 for all I know. Whatever it was Warhammer Fest. And I announced that we were doing the Enemy Within at that one. Oh gosh, it must be 2018. But we also announced that we were going to be doing a new campaign with Gav Thorpe. And that campaign book would be supported by a Marienburg book, an Ulthuan book, and a Nagaroth book. And that was what was announced then. Obviously, those plans didn't come to pass because I resigned and they took the game in a different direction. And they instead went up through Salzenmund instead. And great. That means Salzenmund got detailed instead. But I'm really glad that they're doing Marienburg because it's pretty much the most important city in the old world. Population well over 1 million and truly enormous and awesome. It'll be interesting to see if they stick with the population over 1 million. I had a conversation with Workshop at the time, and we were talking numbers of around about 1.3 million, something like that, with Altdorf at around about the million mark. Bloke person, I've been trying to make a complete gazetteer of the Reikland, giving settlements that didn't get population wealth. What would Kalgen's wealth be from 1 to 5, 5 being Altdorf? That's a really good question. Let me come back in yet because we haven't quite done it. I'm going to be doing my own gazetteer for Up and Down the Reich very, very soon. So you might want to compare and contrast with what I do there, because obviously my peeps are in a barge at the moment, and they're going up and down the Reich, and they want to know this information for potential trading. I've just done myself a bunch of new trading rules, and I've done myself a new bunch of barge upgrade rules. And for that to work, I need obviously all of the trading numbers for all of the settlements as well. And the numbers that are officially out there are woefully inadequate. Like by, say, for example, I needed 100 numbers. They provided me with 3. That's the number that they're so far behind on. And I'm going to be massively pushing for that to get finished. 4. Yeah, it needs it. It absolutely desperately needs it. So it'll be interesting to see when that occurs. Is the grass of Warhammer could be inspired by this world, considering that after 1492 Columbus made most of the world is American grass? Yeah, so I think that in many respects is an interesting one, and you got to remember that the Warhammer world is utterly unlike the real world. Right from the beginning, it was completely manufactured by the old ones. The concept of needing humanity to take things from major continents is just not the case in the Warhammer world. The Warhammer world almost certainly had its tomatoes over in the old world right from the beginning, rather than having to wait for something to arrive, or potatoes et al. So the issues that were leveled at, say, the Lord of the Rings movie would not be leveled at the Warhammer world. Completely different setup. Yeah, my mom was cool. She got me into Warhammer stuff in the beginning. I imagine I had a bookcase full of not just hundreds but thousands of horror, sci-fi, and fantasy books that I devoured when I was a kid. By the age of 10, I must have read hundreds, maybe thousands. I loved them. Considering the woods of the Warhammer universe are magical, they are often, not always. Do wooden structures stand stronger, longer, shorter? They all do. But you've got to realize that there's 2 issues here, both on they last longer because they are full of magic, and even dead trees, which are now more the realm of Shyish, perhaps, than the realm of Gyron. But they all have gathered a certain amount of magic in them, which allows them to stand for longer than real-world equivalents. But then you also have Dar, that accumulation of magic that rots things and make things go wrong. Plus, if magic goes stagnant, if there's too much of it, it often goes very wrong. For example, when Jade magic, Gyron goes completely wild, everything gets overripe, all the wood begins to buckle and burst and get swollen and wet. And that doesn't necessarily require any local, let's say, material reasons for that to be the case. Magic alone can do it. So yes to all of that. Plus, it can also degrade faster because, you know, it'll go at the speed of plot typically for Warhammer. Check out Gaming More Time. It's made very dense buildings for that one. Yes, they have. Yeah, and nothing else saying that. Some of the More Time sets. One of the cartographers that I hired for Warhammer, his More Time set was gorgeous. A Club with Andy was that was when I was a kid. I was 16 when I set that one up. That was a long time ago. Adam, hi Adam. Can anyone give a list of the Gen Con announcements? I think we've actually got most of them already mentioned in the comments. I got told by somebody else in passing at some point, but yeah, I'm sure there's probably an official post somewhere, right? Do they really need to compile a bunch of rules that they added in later books? That would be nice, wouldn't it? And in comes Papa Vaniglia. I should stop trying to pronounce it. Hey, Papa, great to see you here. Right, so now we've done that little bit. I'm going to come in. I'm going to do my highlights and shades on these sections here because we've had nothing else suggested to go in there. Oops, I made that far too big. Let's drop that down. Shades, please. Let's just pop those into place. Again, if you want to know what the hell I'm doing, I did a big tutorial for this over on the Rookery. Let's just pop this all the way along. This is far longer than I would have liked. Especially, there we go. Tower. That'll do. It's not perfect, but it'll do for the moment. Let's just get these bits in. Don't want to spend too long on this. Other things to do before we quit out for the day. Is that it? Almost. Okay, cool. Let's get our highlights in place. Not going to do anything particularly expansive on these. Keep it nice and simple. Okay. That could hardly be any easier. I'll maybe do a little bit of extra texture on the dirt later. And if I'm right, if I zoom out, yep. So we're going to be on the back of this palace. I'm not doing this just now, but on the back of the palace just now, in this area here, we're going to get a lot of very traditional gardens, all squared off, boxed off with topiary, little walkways, and similar. They're all going to be running around, but we're not going to do those yet because we're only drawing on the inside of the walls just now. So that brings us up to the end of the palace. I don't want to stop quite yet, though. I've got 10 minutes before I intended to stop. I was thinking 2 hours today would be a nice turnaround. So what I'll do is I'll also take this section here and here. So we've got ourselves a dyer's yard. We've got ourselves a big inn over here, a temple of Marina that never really came to pass. A section here which needs to look relatively pretty because that's the way up towards the main routine. So whatever that is needs to be pretty. But a huge chunk here at the back. What is sitting beside the palace there? That I think is interesting. If you can pull up some ideas for that, if you can think of anything that could lie between the palace and what eventually becomes a pretty lower class area over on the left-hand side there, yeah, do bring it up. I'll add a little bit of texture to the ground where I was there. But if you've got any ideas for anything that could go in there, do drop them into the comments now. If not, I'll just fill it up with some building or another and we'll see what we get. You know, just the idea that this here is the, yeah, slightly better. I'm going to get rid of where it goes over. Nice. So if you've got any ideas for anything that could go in there, do drop them in. If you don't bring anything in, I'll just make it up myself. And that's a little bit too much on that one too. Just tidy that up. There. Just putting a couple of lines in here just to give the idea that the backside is the backside is a bit scuffed up and dirty. But I'm not going to do very much with that. Just enough to provide a little bit of extra texture and nothing more. Okay, I'm going to jump into the comments, see if there's any ideas for anything at the back there. And if not, I'll just start filling it up with stuff. Okay, so let's have a quick check. First, Mr. Sniffles. Hello, Mr. Sniffles. Andy, have you written up what the different keys of the Bright Brizzards are anywhere? Yes, I have. We're going to be popping that over in our blog relatively soon because one of our characters in the Lawhammer streams is a Bright Wizard and he's pursuing those keys. Big water feature draining out into the lower class area due to poor watertight seals. I've already got burst water sections in the map already, and I've got several water features including several fountains in the south of the city, so I am less keen to do duplications. Barracks for the palace and city guard, that's already included with the big wings at the front. Richard, good idea though. But that's what if I bring up my brush, that's what much of these areas around here are dealing with. And Esty comes in with originally planned as houses for visiting dignitaries, perhaps, but now, due to lower class connotations, they've been sold to merchants who are not quite rich enough to buy on the hill. Okay, yeah, I'm not against that idea. That's definitely a good start. General Caster, could be some sort of urban wetlands looking thing. We've already got an urban wetlands down the south, although not one that was planned. So again, I'd rather not duplicate concepts if we can. You want to try and give each one of the areas their own tone. And if we have the same tone being repeated when it's not a tone for the overall city, then that's something that I try to avoid. The tone, for example, for this city is not sinking water. It's much more politics, conniving, two-facedness, and things not being quite what they should be. So when we're designing our locations, one of the things we should do whenever we're doing our write-ups, for example, is ensuring that we mention that in their descriptions, the core message being, in our case, political and things not appearing what they should be. Okay, next, if the part about the woods being magical is true, since the civilizations are expanding the Warhammer landscape and building wooden structures all over the place, would that imply that the winds of magic would be increasing? Therefore, no, because winds of magic change. The winds of magic are everywhere. Everything's magical in Warhammer to a degree. The reasons that the woods are magical per se is because so much living stuff is there and it drags all the Gyrin to it. Plus, there's natural inhabitants, spirits, and the ilk, which, if anything, increase magic. It's worth saying, though, that in comparison to other parts of the world, the forests of the Empire are almost magically dead. Compare them to Athaloran, which is verdant with spiritual activity. Compare it to places like some parts of Cathay or over in Nippon, super alive, where in comparison the corruption that is laced through the Empire's forests have left them a very different place. Compare, say, Avalorn with its rich variety of different spirits with the far less common spirits that you'll encounter over in the Empire. Maybe a school, maybe meant to be taught by priests of Verena. We already have an orphanage and school and Verenans down in the side. Nice idea, but that one is currently sitting with its own little midden ball field beside it, right about here. And again, with Verenans, they originally were going to have a big, huge temple, but they siphoned all the money down there to build this instead. So, good idea, but we've already got that one. We have a flooded slum in the south. Yes, we do. And a big barracks right in the middle of the city. Yes, we do. And down in the south. Maybe an extended terrace of townhouses like Newtown in Edinburgh. See, I quite like that idea, although I imagine that there would be a certain pressure against keeping anything high rise going up against the walls of the palace. Indeed, it wouldn't surprise me if possibly this is even green space with something potentially at the front to cover some part of it. But that it wouldn't surprise me at all if a lot of this just ends up being trees and green space. Although again, if someone's got a good idea for something in there, quite happy not to do that. The Duchess has taken it off her husband's hands to use as part of her patronage. Not against that. If metal wizards can turn other metals into gold, surely they'd be the richest people on the planet. They are, but their gold ain't real. There's a whole thing to discuss about that. Kind of is, kind of isn't. But there is a lot to discuss in that. The Philosopher's Stone is something that's very real in the Warhammer world, but it's not simply gold magic. Alchemy goes down a slightly different route. My bad, you didn't know about the other one. No need to apologize at all. That's what we're here for. The people who've been around since the beginning will correct us as we go. And don't worry about offering ideas that have already been offered. Just keep on throwing them out there. We'll land on some good stuff. How about Lives of Lower Louvres? We don't want to block the view of the castle. Yeah, I agree. A big monument, that's possibly not a bad idea. We've got a couple of monuments kicking around already to various saints, to various previous dukes, also to various military figures. But perhaps green space with monument or an equivalent in this area might not be a bad idea. Are there still treemen in Ulthuan, and do they fight for the High Elves? Absolutely, they do. They're in Avalorn and possibly elsewhere, depending on what the writer of the Times suggests. Will depend upon exactly how many, but they do pop up in the stories every once in a while, particularly around the Everqueen. Hawk Audley, maybe some law officers, high quality craftsmen. That's going to be going down in the middle class area. I'm growing more convinced that they're not going to want to have people right by the walls of the palace. A memorial park, statue of gods and war heroes. Yeah, I think I agree. Nice, is it Nice? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Nice or Nice? But I think I agree that might be a better use of the space, because that means that they can keep that area clear from their walls, which also provides that sense of separateness that you're looking for the local nobles, where they want to be separated and discreet from the rest of the city. SD just replying to the bloke person. Heron says, could it have been accommodation for the construction workers? Considering, Heron, you are already behind. If I zoom out, you don't know this one, but I'm going to bring it in. We have got not just lots of down here, construction camp, repurposed, and midden ball field too, down in the south. But we've also had some of it collapsing into water, as has been described by multiple others down in the south there. My mouse is getting stuck. Cat fluff got underneath it. Down in there, but some of the old camps here that used to be the stoneworkers, carpenters, et al., have now become slums for a variety of reasons. That was covered in, I was only about 3 or 4 streams back if you want to go back and take a check of it. Marble soldiers, I am amused. To what end? Papa comes in, a long park full of flowering plots, design smells coming from the slums. Yeah, that's actually quite good. That matches with everything else on a memorial park, everything else. I think we're definitely getting a tone. Overgrown into a natural garden space, but the bones of the still accommodation there. Yeah, maybe Richard, a row of green space, small statues. Yeah, we're definitely getting a tone here. It's marble soldiers up to on horse and foot, hippogriffs to the general and a griff or something. There was a Pegasus one that's marked down in the other area. You go to the edge of the green and then do some kind of marble fountain lane in the middle, given there's so much stuff right across the street. Yeah. Where's the high class district? I'll pop out and let you see that the primary one is up on the hill up here. You can see it says upper class. Sitting on it. We also have ourselves some middle class areas, some slums down here that get pissed on by the upper class that's sitting above, large mustering grounds, middle class and lower class down by the river there. But the true upper class area where most of the dignitaries will be staying, those that aren't staying in the palace, is up here. We also have a branch of the Imperial Hotel, which is in multiple places across the Reikland. We also have a branch of L&S, that's Luigi and Salvatore, the multi-branch, let's call them dodgy shop. They're not dodgy, but they service the middle to upper classes as well. So that's going to be up there. Our biggest Middenball park is going to be in this area as well, in the shadow of the hill. So that'll be quite fun. See, this is an interesting question in general, not really for the stream, and I think should be picked up later. Are the Phoenix Guard monks? Can they visit their families, travel outside Ulthuan, and their family visit them? Can they be adventurers? Now, ultimately, whenever the roleplay game comes along, the answer will always be yes, they can be adventurers. They will find reasons to make that so, which means that there are going to be methods for them to get out. But the Phoenix Guard are sworn to protect the good old, well, Flame of Azurin. And depending upon which version of the books that you read, the Flame of Azurin is either in the very center of a pyramid or is sitting on top of it in very old one fashion. And indeed, it is the flame of the god himself, in the same way that, say, for example, Ulrich's flame in Middenheim is the flame of the god himself. And it does start bringing some interesting parallels between the pair of them. The Phoenix Guard, though, are effectively like the equivalent of human priests, although they're literally nothing like priests. The way that they manifest in Lawhammer in my game is through the path rules that we have, but that is not for this stream. Heron says, I think I was actually in for that one, thinking about it. Yeah, quite. Esther then goes, Stink of Dye works coming in that direction. Right, yes, there is. And I think that the idea of planting all this, the nice flower beds there really does work well. There's a part, maybe there's some elven ruins that they keep. So there is no elven ruins here, but unless you're suggesting that they've been brought in from somewhere else. There is some elven ruins, for example, up in the heights of the nearby hills and mountains where the Halls could get all their money from their mines. So they could have brought down some of that. I'm not adverse to that. I feel like there's a story in that. If it's gardener space, it could have a Tillian feel to it. Maybe lots of follies and similar. Yeah, I quite like that too. So an open space to cover the smell, follies, similar, yes. Thank you for the district guide. I have been very loose with the district guide this time. Population is between 10 15,000. The very first stream covers this. And I can't recall off the top of my head. We might have gone for 15 in the end. But the very first stream discusses it. And it also explains how the scale was set, because there's some basic demographic information that was used to set up how big the space we needed to get the population that we wanted in the area. How about a drying green for the Paris laundry? That would definitely not be on the outside. That would be hidden away. It does sound like something nobles would do. It sort of does, doesn't it? If we're talking about moving our ruins around, there's definitely something in that. There's always an excuse to adventure in RPG. Agreed. Protecting the Flame of Azurin could conceivably need to be done elsewhere for magical reasons. Indeed, in the Lawhammer game, Father Leopold is from a chapter of Sigmarites that protects the Flame of Ulrich. Now, obviously, the Ulrichans have a lot to say to that, and never let the chapter anywhere near it. The capitular, pardon me, of that is Werner Stoltz. Werner Stoltz is a capitular in multiple books, and a capitular is someone who's got their own chapter of special priests that look after an important site or relic of Sigmar. And the important site in this particular case is the Flame of Ulrich, because Sigmar passed through it. Many believe that this is the point when Sigmar moved from being just a man into being effectively a demigod, maybe even a god. Really appreciate these streams, no problems. Always answering lower questions, even though it may not be related to what you're doing. One thing I always see tons of around today is a small commemorations to people or stories. Maybe the Kennel's a great Griffin rider, be to honor near the Pence. I agree that something like that might work quite well. The Elven ruins could be follies that they could swap in ruins for different diplomats. They're on the outside of the wall, so I think this would be a more permanent structure than other ones. But we already have a few swapped in places, and I do quite like that. Would elves be all right with that? Humans picking over the settlements and rebuilding it somewhere else, considering we have an embassy of Ulthuan currently parked up, and I do believe that you probably got a point. But I do like contention. And I do like a certain amount of conflict. Whenever you're creating locations, one thing you should always consider is, does it bring conflict? Does this bring some interest to the location that's going to cause different groups to be against each other? So in the perfect world, of course, they'd never insult others, but you got to remember, some people will want to insult others. They'll go out of their way to try and make themselves look hyperculture by taking the elven stuff. The elves have problems with this. They go, these are mine. It suddenly turns into an Elgin marble situation. I definitely think that there's something in this. Why are the High Elves such a great naval power? Surely Blackheart destroys every ship. You clearly haven't played Man of War. If you play the Man of War game, you'll get an idea of just how fucking amazing the High Elves are. When it comes to the high seas, the High Elves rule the waves. Now, if we're just talking on number of ships, if they had an equal number, the High Elves would win every single naval engagement. Dark Elf fleet was really good, but the Dark Elf fleet was a completely different kettle of fish. Now, the Dark Elves have access to a different variety of natural-based resources that are not as good as many of the ones that you get on Ulthuan. And let's say the multi-hulled contraptions of the High Elves, combined with their high magic, are astonishingly good, and they're also astonishingly fast. So if that isn't reinforced in the Ulthuan book when it comes out, I'll be very, very surprised, because the High Elves kick ass. My name is pronounced this, hiss, or miss, so it's Ness. Excellent. Are you planning on making a full Kalegen sourcebook? That'd be awesome. I can't really make a full Kalegen sourcebook because obviously I don't own Warhammer. I can, however, pop it all up for free, and it will be going all up there and created by us. If you want to join us writing it, created by us over on World Anvil. It got put on massive hold when I was ill, but that's all going to be returning relatively soon. Rogan, it could just be a blooming street. The place else is huge. Fit for all purposes. Yeah, I agree. The road along the palace to the gate is intended to be the route towards Middenland. That's fair. Something on the Midlanders. That is a really good point, Yalla. Thank you very much for bringing it up. At least some of the statues we end up, and we'll want something as well to impress the Midlander dignitaries that are coming through from that side, assuming they're not coming from ship. So, yeah, they're going to come in that way and that way. So, yeah, I think statues, flowers, impressive stuff. It's looking more and more likely that's what it should be. I'll take Este's comment as the last one. Maybe open world could maybe open area could keep following the road beyond the palace, sort of on park. I'm going to keep the walls definitely in place, sitting behind that. So, right, I'm going to jump in now and take a look at what we've got and line it out. I'm going to first turn it green. I'm quite convinced we want gardens here now. So I'm just going to pop that in green. So at least we know what we're dealing with. Going to, do I want formal gardens? Do I want it to be loose and free? Because if it's loose and free, you can almost just do it with trees and allow that to do the hard work. So I'll do that first. Match what we've got going on the other side. The idea of some form of boulevard making its way down. And this one will be slightly different. So we'll do that differently. We'll have this one. And then we can have a statue sitting in between the areas at the back of each one. Yeah, okay. Sort of getting the idea here. And then this one here can be more traditional garden, perhaps, to impress folks that are making their way along there. Yeah, okay. So let's just get myself my road layer, pop that on, go to a size 9 brush. Let's separate this out. Yeah, okay. I think I'm going to keep this really simple in terms of how I'm going to present it. Just getting an idea of what it all looks like first. Going on quiet while I can figure out what I'm doing with this. Okay, cool. And I will quickly add in some simple detail. Brush, please. Okay. Building some sort of statues at the back here, which you can make your way over to. Each one accessible individually. And there we loosely go for at least a bit of that. I want to clarify the pathing in these a little bit more cleanly. So let's just pop a little bit of pathing over that so it can be seen for what it is. Yeah. Now, as I've said multiple times, even if your paths might have things that go over them, you want to make sure that they can be read by the reader regardless. So spend a little bit of time making sure that all the pathways are nice and clear. Right, okay. This is pretty simple, but it's going to do, I think. Add a little bit of tonal shadow in for these. Not too much, just enough to give it a little bit of extra depth. Excellent. Location color. Nope, I want the building color. Drop in a color over these. And do a tiny amount of highlighting, and we are pretty much done. Very simple, but we know what these are for now. Okay, cool. Let's zoom out and see what that looks like there at the side. Bit messy. I'll maybe tidy that up a little bit after, but that's definitely doing its job. Let's see what the other parts there. Where's the link for one other level? Let me just grab that one of those for you because that'll make life a bit easier. Next time, I will have all the links that we need just sitting inside. In fact, why don't I just link up to the one that I just wrote and added today? because I needed it, which is a quick article there about rune fangs, which you may find are a little bit different to what you expect if you know your rune fangs. There's quite a lot of articles slowly but surely spreading across that, but we're still very much in the infancy over there. Pub, we've already got for Toddy. Although Todbringer won't be coming down here, the setup for this map is 2512, and Middenland is not run by Boris Todbringer. Boris Todbringer rules from Middenheim. Middenland instead is run by the Bildhofens, and for those of you who know your family lines, you'll know that that is the let's say the descendants of Emperor Magnus the Pious, who rebound the empire together 200 years ago. Richard Allen adds, would widening the gatehouse and then widening the road to be double wide with gardens on both sides work? Yeah, possibly, although I quite like the idea that, as is often the case with these things, they have plans, the plans fall through, they intend to start off with one thing, and we've not reached a point where they're going to go scorched earth and start blasting bits out and replacing them. This part was expanded out and was originally going to be something else. Indeed, you might be able to see it. I'm going to mark it in now. But there's the remains of the original road. Let me see if I can get this to actually appear on the map. Nope, that's not. My brush is way too small. Let's get a nice big brush. There we go. We can see that. The range of the original road used to go from the fishing village, which is here, up to the old Garden of Moor. That's the graveyard. And now the palace is built right over that. You can still see the original road that went through there and then went once up all the way through there. And yeah, well, I've just knocked something over. It was supposed to be well planned, but it kind of isn't, because as each successive person came in, they did different things. Maybe gardens more like Midland heroes. Yeah, I think marbles and statues, and I definitely think that having a Midland tone here makes sense. By follow road, I meant it could continue further south at the same width. Oh, I see what you're saying, all the way down. Maybe, although I'm quite keen to leave that off until we get there. So if Esty, if you're in the stream when we expand into that middle class area, bring it up again, because I'll probably forget. So I won't be doing that bit just now, but I think that's possibly a good idea. Yellow then adds, I think that on the corner of the unfinished temple and the Knights of the Swan Country House, we could have something impressive or intended to be impressive but failed. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. For those of you not quite sure where Yala was talking about, it's this section right here. We've got ourselves the unfinished temple of Arena there. We've got the knights there, and we've got their palace and the rather impressive, if we decide to call that, conservatory or whatever there. And we're going to have a very impressive Templar Myrmidia there. And I'm wanting a Templar Myrmidia that is at least as big as the very big Sigmarite presence down there, which is not going to be the only one. We're going to have another Sigmarite temple up there as well. And I want the Templar Myrmidia to probably be the largest in the city to really piss everybody off. Moving on down. Thanks a lot, says Goban. Great. And General Castle then says, no town planning services, contract with the construction crew. Carl Franz, maybe. Yeah, quite. All right, let's have a quick look. Have we filled in that entire area? The answer is yes, we have. We have completed our palace district. Have we lasted more than 2 hours? We have. Oh, look at that. So I think I'm going to call it an end here. If you haven't voted already for what Laurel Master of Sotek and I are going to be discussing next Sunday, you can do so over in the, I forgot what tab it is again. Oh man, it's inside in YouTube in the communities tab, I believe. So do go check that one out down there, because it's going to be up for about 5 minutes after this stream if you want to do a vote for what we're going to talk about. And then I'm going to shut it off and ping over the Lore Master of Zotek and say, we're discussing this. And it's going to be community tab. Thanks very much, Hawk. So that's number one. Number two, if you want to know how to do proper, concise, detailed, professional level write-ups for a big city like this, I'm doing a masterclass this Saturday on Inside the Rookery. If you want to know more about that, in fact, I'm just going to go grab the link for that now while I'm talking, because that masterclass is going to frickin' rock. I'm looking forward to it quite a lot, because I don't often discuss what is, let's be honest, my core job, which is building and developing material rather than doing the whole mapping thing. Mapping may be the thing I'm known most for, but I have for about the last 10 to 15 years of my life been working on other people's stuff and showing them how to make it better. If you would like to join us over on Inside the Rookery, you need to be a Brazen Rook or higher. And you'll need to have joined us by Saturday by 7 p.m. if you'd like to watch it live. That 7 p.m. this Saturday is going to be kind of awesome. The week after that, Andy Leask is going to be doing a talk on for an hour. It's going to be a good one, his one, for how to write when you have no inspiration. It's a skill, and it's a skill that he excels at. So that's going to be a really good one too. Anyway, that's Inside the Rookery stuff. That's the Lore Beards this Sunday. Beyond all that, I would also like to say, do come along tomorrow for Lawhammer. Tomorrow, our party are making their way up toward the Damon's Bowl. I've just popped a little piece of art up for that over in Discord. I think it's also popped up on I've also popped it up over on X Twitter, whatever the frick you want to call it, and over on Facebook too, if you follow us in those two places. And if you don't, please do so. So yeah, if you want to go see that, that's tomorrow. We're going to be doing that. It's going to be a particularly epic little piece of adventure. I'm really looking forward to it. That's one of the reasons that today's stream is going to be a bit shorter too. Plus, I've got some writing I need to go do the second the stream's done as well. I'm going to go and do some stuff for Mark Gibbons. If you don't know Mark, you should know Mark. Go type in the words Mark and Gibbons and Warhammer, and you'll get to see some of the best Warhammer art what has ever been done. So yeah, do go do that. So that's tomorrow for Lawhammer, and beyond that, the all-important call to action. Please, if you haven't, do subscribe to us here, whether you're on YouTube or Twitch. Indeed, if you're on YouTube, subscribe here, then go over to Twitch and subscribe there. It makes all the difference for our numbers, and we are doing these streams because of your support out there. So thank you so much for everyone who does support us. I'm now going to piss off and have myself a fine evening twiddling with some words. So I shall see you all next time. The stream will be on next Thursday. We will be doing this one. And I also intend to do myself a little side stream about Total War Warhammer, because apparently I'm going to be playing that because I kind of can't help myself. So expect that soonish. I'll do a quick ping over in our Discord when it's going to go live, and it will probably be impromptu in that it will just go live at some point and we'll talk about some shit and then stop. Other than that, lovely seeing you all. I shall see you next time. In fact, before I go, just in case there's any other things, thanks for the stream as always. Oh, you're all the best. Oh, you're all the best. You're all the best. I love you all. I will see you all next week, if not before. Oh, tidy bye.